The origin of this lecture may perhaps be a purely British problem, and I hope this will emerge perhaps in the course of a discussion afterwards, but it's concerned with the role of literature, reading and discussing literature in the teaching of foreign languages. And it was written because I'm a professor of German, not a professor of English or Russian. You might wonder what I'm doing here, but I have an administrative role as well. So that some of the references I'll give you refer to examples of German, but we can discuss parallel examples afterwards, perhaps. The first point that I need to make is that modern languages, foreign languages, the study of foreign languages in England was established at university level relatively late. Modern languages departments for the study of languages at universities didn't begin until early this century, so they have existed in many cases for 70 or 80 years. When they were established, they needed to assume academic respectability. In other words, they had to be accepted alongside with subjects which had veneration and were regarded as dignified and the proper object for academic study, such as law and phonos such as classics. In other words, the study of ancient Greek and the study of Latin. Now, the reason for this was that in the middle of the 19th century in Britain there had been a very violent debate about the future of education, and the debate had been between two sides: those who supported what was called liberal education and those who supported scientific education. And the result of this debate was that liberal and scientific education were split from one another in the English system. The subjects which retained respectability in the true academic sense were the liberal subjects. They were history, the scriptures, theology, classics, law. These subjects were still regarded as true academic subjects. Science couldn't be ignored because of the enormous growth in scientific thinking, but was kept rather separate, and it meant that most academic study in England was very unpractical. To be practical was not regarded as a virtue of any kind. It was regarded as low and vulgar. Science managed to survive in Britain by being theoretical and pure, and the subjects which suffered most as a result of this debate were actually engineering and what you could call the vocational subjects, practical subjects. Now, this is a rather long explanation, but I think you'll now understand why, when modern languages were introduced into universities at the beginning of this century, in order to be respected, they had to follow the liberal tradition. In other words, the academic liberal tradition, and not to follow the practical vocational line. And so it was that when they appeared, the teaching of the language and expertise in speaking and using the language were not part of the subject of university at all. What happened instead was that the study was concerned with the history of the language, with theology, which was a natural thing to stem from the study of the classics, and also the study of the high literature. In other words, the best works, the best surviving works of the classical canon of literature. Now, that tradition of modern languages in higher education not being practical, not being concerned with people knowing how to speak and write a language, but being concerned with discussions of literature, has continued until today. And that is the setting for the paper that I'm going to give you. In other words, the needs of modern students of modern languages, which is to speak a foreign language and, as I'm sure you will agree, to be able to write a foreign language, have not been met by traditional courses, traditional university courses. And we have now reached the point of historical crisis, in my view.